here. Scott and I are going to do a little presentation. As Russell said, hopefully there's one or two pieces of information that you can get out of this presentation tonight that saves you some heartache, headache, reduces liability, improves driver behavior, makes yourself more marketable, which makes yourself more defendable should a claim happen. There's an article in the SWPA, and I'm going to refer back to it a little bit. If you haven't read it, I recommend reading it. It's a good article. Mike helped out with it, so I won't take all the credit. But the first piece I want to talk about is that so tonight we're going to talk about MVRs, we're going to talk about drivers, we're going to talk about what we can find out about that driver via their MVR, what may or may not be on that MVR, some other places to look, and then what we need to do to make sure that we're in compliance from a DOT standpoint. Hopefully y'all have one of these. It's a handout. It's branded from Bitco, and it's actually a great document. You should have multiple files for your employees at your office, because there are certain files that just need employee stuff in them, loans or safety pieces, that safety issues or potential injuries that don't need to be in their driver qualification file. The only thing that should be in your driver qualification file is what is required by the FMCSA. And that's something that come audit time, or they call them inspections, they're going to want to look at this driver qualification file. Prior to COVID, with the ELDs, they had a lot of their enforcement was on ELD, form and manner stuff, prior to ELDs, which was all in the books. ELDs took away the form and manner violations, and so they were going to start looking at driver qualification files. They were going to start looking at the roadside inspections and how they correlated to the daily pre-trip or post-trip inspections, and were those done correctly. But this driver qualification checklist, let's go down it. First thing that you should get is, after you have checked out that driver, and before we jump into this, when you're sending that driver to your insurance agent or the CSR on your account, they're not advising you if you can hire them or not. They're not saying you can't hire them. They're advising you that they meet the minimum acceptability standards for whichever carrier that you're with. And there's a lot of misunderstanding about there, and I've had a lot of insureds say, well, you told me I could hire him, or an attorney called and said, well, this insured said that you couldn't hire him. I said, unfortunately, we don't make that determination. We just advise whether or not they meet the carrier's minimum acceptability standards. Once they've met those carriers' minimum acceptability standards, and we advise that they do, then that's when your job, your obligation comes up, and that's running through the clearinghouse. They've got to make sure that they're, what's the right word?
Not on the prohibited list.
Not on the prohibited list. If they're prohibited, they can't drive until they go through the SAP, which is the Substance Abuse Program. You've got to run a full query on that person in order to get that information when you first hire them.
And if you don't have that now, if you don't have a full query and he gets pulled over, he's out of service. You're going to have to go get him, and then somebody's going to have to get in trouble.
And they're going to start fining you after the 6th of January 23, pretty significantly, if you got a prohibited driver in your truck. So it's going to be even more important. That program will have been in place for 3 years.
That's the same one that we got started there.
You're talking about the clearinghouse, right?
The clearinghouse, drug and alcohol clearinghouse.
That's it.
Yeah. So, that's one piece of the puzzle, run them through that clearinghouse. If you're trying to get a driver through, it may make sense when you're having that conversation with that driver to say, let's run you real quick through this clearinghouse. And if they're not signed up for it, they've got to have an email on file, and that email gets sent to them. If you do that while they're in your office, you're a lot more likely to continue that process forward versus saying, go ahead and leave, we'll send you an email. I mean, they're probably never going to come back. If you can get them set up and get that ball rolling while you're there in your office, that's going to be a huge plus.
You say the first thing you do when an applicant come in is go through the clearinghouse thing to start with, because they're not in it, or they could
Get
be
your,
fired.
check the MVR first, and then move on to the.
When you-
Everybody has an email.
Well, yeah, that's right.
They don't.
Yeah.
Josh had to create on ours a lot of
That's-
emails.
That's right. That's exactly. And Russell, I would say there's a charge associated with that.
They are.
So that's one of the first things you should. I would see if they're eligible to be a driver first. And once you've gotten the approval there, then I would do the clearinghouse. Once you've got that approval, they need to be drug tested, and you've got to have a negative test before they can drive. If you stick them in the vehicle before you've got that clean test, you're in violation.
Even if it's just one day.
Yeah, even if it's one day, even if it's your best friend, even if it's your son, if you don't have that, they will, what's the fine on that?
$6,000.
They will fine you.
We had a guy, I think I told you about it, he come, went to the clearinghouse, everything was good, failed the drug test. So he just come from the marijuana plant, Madison, where he was working. It took 45 days to get him, well, I could put him in that truck. To get it out of his system.
Was that benefit for using the marijuana driving the truck?
It just gets all in your skin.
Okay.
I mean, you working on it, it just gets all in you, and they usually say it's like, what was it, 2 weeks or 30 or something like that? But it took 45 days to get him, well, I could put him in that truck. Just working in that place.
And so the CBD oil or the CBD products, that brings up something else. You may be able to buy CBD, without a prescription.
They two types of
But there's-
CBD.
yeah, those-
Well, there's the THC, which you need a prescription for, and that's still maybe okay and acceptable by a state regulation, but it's not federally.
Not fair.
But then the CBD piece can be a pill that they take, it can be an ointment, an oil, anything like that. And it's supposed to be less than 0.3%, but they're not regulated. And so some of these drivers have actually tested hot taking a CBD product. That's something to have a conversation with them about if they're doing that. But what needs to be in the driver qualification file? An application for employment. Now this is for the folks that are going over state lines, and we're going to talk about the difference between accepted intrastate and non-accepted interstate. But this is going to be for those folks whose drivers are going across state lines, is what this looks like. Needs a application for employment. And it's over on the right-hand side. I'm not going to go over all of it, but it tells you how long you must maintain that document for. You need an application for employment. I'm not going to go over the road test certificate. You've got to pull the safety performance history records. That's one of those pieces that you'll get off of that application for employment. Safety performance history. Inquiry to state agencies for a 3-year driving record. Even though your agent has pulled that MVR, every single motor carrier, and loggers are considered motor carriers, every single motor carrier needs to have an MVR in their file within 30 days of hire. That MVR needs to be pulled every 12 months. You need a new MVR in that file every year.
And it can't be one that you get from your agent. You can't do it.
You cannot, the law prohibits your agent from sharing that information with you. It's called an end user agreement that they signed with that MVR provider. The MVR provider, we can send them to the insurance company that you're with. The insurance company can send them to us. We cannot share them with the insurers. That's something that either that driver needs to go to the DMV and obtain, or better yet, if you really need an agreement with a Hire Right or a LexisNexis in order to pull those MVRs.
I don't think I got any MVRs.
Well, that's
I'm probably not the
you learn one thing. If you learn nothing else, you learn one thing. So
My agent come down and said, well, you can.
When my agent sends me an MVR or a new hire,
That's just
it
to get
doesn't
hired.
say it's from the agent, it's straight from the state. I mean, that's good, isn't it? Are you saying you got to get your own?
he's
You
in
can't tell that one's different from the one I get myself.
he's in violation. But now, if it's from the state, let's say that the driver got it and gave it to your agent, then that's okay. But
As long as there's a release,
that,
the driver gotta sign a release, then it's okay.
But the agent doesn't pull it from the same data bank that the driver would.
We're going to the state.
the driver would pull it from the state. You would be pulling it from a third party.
You would go to the DDS.
But we can, once you get set up like that, you can go right to it and get it yourself every year.
Every year.
What
Yes,
you
sir.
got, yeah. And
Absolutely.
it's just, it's simple as an email.
It's not even an email. You just go into your system and you put in that person's name, date of birth, driver's license number, and it shoots out that.
Send it right to you.
Yes, sir. Yeah. So, 3-year driving record needs to be on file within 30 days of hire. The next one, pre-employment screening program. So we're going to talk about in just a second, we're going to talk about what is on an MVR. An MVR is going to show anything that city police departments give those drivers. It's going to show anything that a highway patrol or trooper gives them in their personal vehicle.
Sheriff's Department.
And anything that the sheriff's department gives them, whether it's in a commercial vehicle or in their personal car. It is not going to show them anything that they got from a highway patrol or DOT officer while driving your commercial truck. The exception to that is going to be a weight violation. We'll show that in a second. But the things that they get while in your truck hauling a load of logs is not going to be on their MVR, because there's not going to be a fine associated with it. It's going to only be found through your FMCSA scores, your CSA basic scores, or SMS basic scores, or through this PSP. So
You're talking about a warning violation.
well, it's a warning. It's not actually a warning because it goes against your profile and it goes against that driver. But yes, oftentimes it is called a warning because there's no money associated
The
with it.
driver will come back and say, yeah, I got a warning, but it's nothing on my record. It's on your record.
Well, it's on his record, it's just on his PSP record, that's right. So oftentimes, we've seen drivers that have a perfectly clear MVR, and you pull them on a PSP, and it's pop, 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 pop. They have absolutely destroyed someone's profile. And that's the whole reason they're out in the marketplace, is because they've driven that person's score sky high, even though they've got a clean MVR, because everything they got was in a commercial motor vehicle. So the only way to tell, to get a true understanding of what that driver's record is to pull that 3-year MVR and then look at the PSP. And a PSP is an additional charge, but it does give you a lot better idea of what that driver looks like, which enables you to make a better hiring decision. And speaking of hiring decisions, I highly recommend, even if those folks meet, sorry Mike, I'll try to be better with that. Even if those folks meet the minimum underwriting guidelines, I would still recommend that y'all vet them. I'd still have someone that rides with them in a truck that sees it. If they truly understand how to strap a load, how to throw that strap, how to trim a truck, that they understand how to do a proper pre-trip or post-trip inspection, that they've got the right attitude that's gonna be, that's gonna fit in with your culture. Because truly, that's what this is all about. It's about finding the right driver that fits in with your culture, that's gonna be an asset, that's gonna care about your stuff, that's gonna do the right things, that has the right mentality. And if they don't do that, then that's probably the next accident. Unfortunately, the GPS things and the event recorders, dash cams, telematics, they're expensive to have, but they're even more expensive not to have. And if you looked at it as, what would someone riding with that driver every day, how much would that cost you to see if that's the right person, if they're doing the right things? Shoot, today it could be $180,000, a $200,000 rig, plus it could potentially be your company, it could be your livelihood that you're entrusting these folks with. So it's important that you put that right person behind the seat of your truck and not just a warm body to hold the steering wheel.
Further to what he's saying, I learned a couple years ago that just because that MVR is clear, does that mean that guy can drive? It don't mean nothing. It don't mean he knows how to do nothing but hold the steering wheel, or he hadn't been caught.
There's one right now that's got a clean MVR, that's running around, he's trying to get a job, and the last time, all he did is sit out for 3 years. He got involved in an accident, he was positive in that accident, it cost a bunch of money, and he just sat out for 3 years, and now he's hunting a job. And that his record's clean, that's right.
And somebody bought to hire.
What about the situation of where, when you interviewing somebody, write down the carriers for the last 10 years, and there's 2 or 3 of them, and I send the request off, a lot of times I don't get responses from some people, as long as I make the request. Okay.
And
the
so
clearinghouse is the catch-all.
what's gonna happen is once the clearinghouse has been there for 3 years, that's what everyone's been told, is that thing's gonna go, that record request is gonna go away. Pre-employment drug and alcohol test, you gotta get the test, you gotta run through the clearinghouse. I'm gonna skip over to the 3rd page. And this is the ongoing updates. Remember, this is just our driver qualification file. This is not our employee file. It's not anything else. It should not have our safety handbook in it. It shouldn't have the sign off for the drug testing piece. This should just be the driver qualification file. Inquiry to state agencies for a driving record annually. So we should be pulling that annual MVR. Review of driving record annually. So, just like before, the MVR only shows us a portion of what's on that driver's record. The rest of it, if they've been with us for the last 12 months, or since we last pulled it, the rest of that data is going to be on our FMCSA profile. So we've got to look at what were all those inspections that he got, along with what's on his MVR, and do that annual review with the driver. And we've got to sign off on that. We go over what's on his MVR, if there are any changes, what violations he's got in a truck. If there have been some issues there, it may make sense to do some remediation. It may make sense to assign him a team safe trucking course or 2. And that's showing that you've done your due diligence. You've said, yes, there's a little bit of an issue. Here's how we can have some corrective measure. Driver certification violations. Medical examination report. So that shows up on the MVR. You guys can see that if you pull the MVR. And we'll get into that in a second. It shows who their medical provider was when their med cert expires, if they're subject to have one. And let's jump into, let's show y'all what a PSP looks like. So this is what a PSP looks like. This is a
PSP stands for
pre-employment screening program. So again, by the FMCSA, This shows their name, crash activity for the last 5 years, so it shows if, I mean, they could have a clean MVR and have wrecked 3 trucks. Is that the person you want to put in your vehicle? This will show you if they've had any commercial accidents. It'll show you, this one was, not preventable. So, that's a whole nother discussion, but if we're not doing data queues, and if we're not doing our crash contestability on those crashes that aren't our fault, that meet those 16 or 17 criteria to contest them, we really need to be doing that. Because if we can get not preventable on our FMCSA profile, on 1 or 2 of those crashes, that removes those from the metrics. That's very important. If you got questions about that, y'all know how to get in touch with me, call me, I can help you with that. But we should be looking at the parameters of every crash, and if it's potentially contestable, we should be contesting. But this is what our PSP looks like. So we would look at, and this shows driver out of service rate 50%, vehicle out of service rate 25% based upon this driver. If you've got someone that comes in and he's got 100% out of service rate and 100% vehicle out of service rate, and he's had 10 inspections, person's not doing their pre-trip inspections. They're not holding up their end of the bargain and how they're operating those vehicles for whoever they worked for previously. And they're probably not going to do that for you. So PSP is a great thing to have. I want to show you. Russell told me I could show this. But anyhow, this is your, this is the FMCSA SMS system. This is what it looks like. Hopefully y'all are looking at this at least on a monthly basis. And here are your basics down here. Those are your 7 basics right there. The 2 that impact us the most are unsafe in the logging business, or unsafe driving, which is going to be our driver's behavior. That's going to be seat belts. That's going to be speeding. That's going to be talking on the cell phone. So unsafe driving and vehicle maintenance are the 2 that impact us the most in logging. Up here at the top, this is our out of service percentage for vehicle. This shows us how many inspections we've had, how many vehicles we've got. I'm going to show you all this unsafe driving piece right here. So these,
Y'all know how to do that, y'all go do it. Y'all go to the internet. Pull that up. Pull it up on anybody. You see somebody that's doing worse than you. Just think of write down their DOT number. This is public information. You go and type in the DOT number or whoever, and this is what comes up.
so and honestly, Russell and I have talked about this for a long time. Having a green score means that you're less likely to be picked on. If you've got a green light in that system, they mash in your DOT number, they're not going to mess with you. If you've got a yellow light, they may or may not. If you've got a red light, you're guaranteed to get pulled over. They are going to be on you, and their objective is they can inspect 3% of the carriers out there. They're going to use those resources to quantify which 3% they need to look at and either clean them up or get them off the road. That's what they say. There's some issues with this program, but it don't feel like that.
It feels like they get the newer trucks and the junk, they leave it alone.
Well, they do the newer trucks. I've talked to somebody.
I mean, I'm the one that gets stopped on.
You get good inspections of it.
Right, yeah.
But they won't do level 1s on.
But still, I mean, heck, we lose a load.
I know.
I'm sitting there on the side.
He goes after newer trucks. He goes after newer trucks because when he pulls that truck over on the side of the road, he knows that he's not gonna be there for 3.5 hours, right?
Well, he can crawl under mine and be clean, you know what I'm saying?
I know that.
He goes under a jump.
He's only got you.
Ask them to do a vehicle inspection.
They won't do it.
They won't do it.
They'll do a level 3 or a level 2 and let you go.
You need that level 1. That way they leave him on.
But refresh my memory, the level two is the vehicle inspection, isn't it?
Level one is the only one that really counts.
The one is the full deal, bro. The level two is still the vehicle piece. That's better than just a three. If you're just getting threes, they're not giving you credit for all the
The
hard
three
work.
is on the driver.
It's driver only. Three is a driver only.
But now you know good well that.
Well, see, I got stopped 3 weeks ago. I got wrote up for a blanker or something anyways. I was good. Well, I had a driver got pulled over last week. He said, you can't go nowhere. I said, what do you mean? Bruce called me. He's like, hey man, the dude told me I couldn't go nowhere. He said, we got unpaid tickets from 3 years ago. He said, my truck's running under impact. And I was like, really?
My problem is
I
that
just got stopped 2 weeks ago. He didn't say nothing to me.
that officer has seen all four sides of your truck when he pulls it up. So if he's seen a bad tire, he's required to write you up for that bad tire.
Yeah, he didn't look at it. He just said, you ain't going nowhere. We got a record. I was like, oh, no, we don't.
So like Ryan said, you're not getting credit.
3 years ago, I got overweight tickets or something. Anyway, I had to pay them before the truck could leave.
Just in a quick question too, while both of you are standing right here, does the flashing light on the end of the load logs, your log light, if that light is not operable, does that show up as,
Shows up.
failure to obey traffic control device?
No, sir. No, it's a light. I'll show you that in just a second.
Everybody traffic control is a stop sign or a red light.
Yeah,
So
it's a 2-point violation is what you're.
There's no way we got 4 tickets for running stop lights or stop signs in this year alone.
But that's what it shows up on.
No, you're not getting that. You've only got one of those.
There's 4 on 5, 6, 22, 2, 21, 22, 2, 15, 20, 22, 2, 11, 20, 22. 4 of them.
Well, let's look at that after this.
Okay, I just was wondering what that was.
But so these 3 right here are the driver infractions that have been cited in the last 24 months. And these will not show up on the MVR. So we got a speeding ticket 6 to 10, a speeding 15 or more, and a failure to obey traffic control device. So those ones right there will not show up on the driver's MVR, and that when you're doing your annual review, you would want to cite those.
Because they're not out of service violation.
None of those are out of service violations. No, sir.
The one you gotta watch for is OOS.
Well, that's one of them. We also don't want this right here, because that's the max,
And
the 10. Yeah, I mean, you know, that's the highest point infraction, that and speeding through a construction zone, school zone, using a cell phone are all 10-point violations.
Using a cell phone while speeding through the school zone.
Yeah.
Wow.
So,
Under the influence. Might not work with it, might.
all right. There we go. Okay.
I told you what it is. I told you to take it to court.
How do I click on it? Okay, there we go. All right, we're gonna run through some MVRs, guys. I tried to redact all this information, but this is super helpful to look at. Can you run this for me, please? Just mash the down arrow. All right, so this first one that we're looking at, CDL, he's disqualified. Why is he disqualified? This is what he does have a CDL Class A, but for whatever reason, he's disqualified. Scroll down for me, please.
It's not expired.
It's not, that's right, it's not expired. Keep going, just go. I got it. All right. Okay, so, hold on, just stop right there. So this fellow right here is non-accepted interstate. So he's self-certified in Class A, non-accepted, meaning that he needs a medical certificate on file. He can go across state lines. So he's good there. Driver status summary. As of May 11, 2022, he's disqualified. Let's see why. Failed to file medical certificate. So he does have a valid driver's license. He does not have a valid CDL license.
cause he
Yeah,
may have went and got a
Medical card, but
medical card, but he didn't go to the driver's license office.
ADS, right.
And, yeah,
Well, he shouldn't have been driving anyway for anybody if he couldn't produce that card to the.
Well, he's not.
He might have
a card in his pocket.
he could have a card in his pocket.
But
Yeah, but don't you require copies
It-
of
it
it?
should-
If you're an interstate carrier, you got to go, that driver has got to go
To
to
the
that,
DMV.
to the DMV.
I know that, but we make sure he does that,
I
and
know
we get
that.
copies
I
of
know
all
that.
that.
But if you hiring somebody, they give you a card.
No, we check it.
Alright, so,
That's the paperwork thing.
That's right. That's right, so that guy's disqualified, that's not saying that he can't, he could, in the state of Florida, he can go self-certified as accepted intrastate, and all of a sudden, he's good to go.
He can't
Or-
cross that state line.
Or, that's right, or he can go get his med cert, and more than likely, he'd be just fine, but he's been disqualified since January 10th of 22. We're gonna look at some of these dates, because some of these dates are important, so keep going down to the next one. Alright, so this person right here, we've got a valid CDL.
The one thing we always look at also is the first, original CDL issue that.
This was issued 92, so he probably had a chauffeur's license prior to that, he was grandfathered in on that.
What year did that start?
92, 91, 92, right in there. So this person, I stuck this up, this person's accepted intrastate, which is that's a self-certification. They go to the DMV or do it online, and if they're accepted, that means they don't need a med cert. Intrastate, they can only stay within state lines. They can't go across state lines. Hauling certain commodities, wood products happen to be one of those commodities, from first place of harvest to first place of process. So they can haul accepted intrastate as long as they don't cross state lines. Med card not required. Clear MVR. So, right, you're gonna say clear MVR if they don't have any infractions. On the one above, they had infractions, so you'll see those infractions. Next one. All right, once again, we got a CDL, Class A, valid. Original issue date on this was 2013. Now, so often